Good evening. Welcome to the San Marino Unified School District Board of Education meeting. It is January 25th, 2022. It is 7 p.m. Here is your board president, Mrs. Namjack.
Thank you, Dr. Choi. So now I'd like to report out of closed session. There is nothing to report, so regular open session will begin now. I call the meeting to order, and we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. We'd like to introduce our honored guest.
Hello, my name is Jingyi Lee, and shall we begin the Pledge of Allegiance?
Love that. Would everyone stand?
All right, put your right hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America.
and to the republic for which it stands,
One
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated.
Thank you so much, Lily, for leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. It is wonderful to see you, and we are so happy to have you. Thank you. All right, next on our agenda is
President Jack, will Lily be talking a little bit about her school?
oh, I apologize, Lily, as the HMS ASB officer, would you like to talk a little bit about what's going on at Huntington?
Of course. So I would like to talk about all the things I love about Huntington Middle School. So there are three major things I love about HMS. It's supportive teachers, the after-school program, and the diverse clubs and activities. So I have great teachers who support me throughout my middle school journey. For example, I can share books with my English teacher and share challenging problems with my math teacher. There is room for everyone at HMS, and that's why I love it. The teachers are always there to support their students. There are also many after-school programs like the Math and Science Support Program, and unlike many other schools, the athletics program at HMS has an intramural team and a travel team, so everyone is included, be it a student who has played basketball since elementary school or a student who's just starting their volleyball journey. And last but not least, there are many clubs open to all students. I am in many of the school clubs. For example, I just had a mock trial meeting just this afternoon, and we were discussing potential strategies we can use for the next tournament in March. And we have just won a tournament in December and November, so it's really exciting. Another program I'm in is the math team, which we have regular competitions every Wednesday and review sessions every Tuesday. So there's pretty much room for everyone in Huntington Middle School, and that's why I love it so much.
Oh, thank you, Lily. You make me want to go back to middle school. So that was a great summary. So thank you so much. And I'm so glad you're doing so well there. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now we're going to go to item 6B, approval of the agenda. It's an action item. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Mrs. Ryan, a second.
Second.
Mrs. Chan, roll call vote. I'm sorry, I can't. Something is, thank you. All right, Mr. Kalaki.
Aye.
Mr. Chang,
Aye.
Mrs. Chan,
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan,
Aye.
student board member.
Aye.
Okay. Namjack, aye. Motion passes. Item number 6C, approval of minutes. It's an action item. It's approval of the January 11th Board of Education minutes. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve January 11th board minutes as read.
There's one correction that I wanted to make on motion for 13F. It was indicated that the motion was made by Ryan and seconded by Chan, and it's actually the reverse. So that one edit correction. I don't know if we need to remake the motion. Sorry.
Shelley, do you
Move.
want to make the motion again with the revision by Mrs. Chan?
Yes, absolutely. I would like to make the motion to approve the minutes as amended by Mrs. Chong.
Second?
Mrs. Chan, all right, roll call vote. Mr. Kalaki,
Aye.
Mr. Chang,
Aye.
Mrs. Chan,
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan,
Aye.
student board member.
Aye.
Ma'am Jack, aye. Motion passes. Now we come to public comments. The Board of Education adopted Board Policy 9323B to ensure the public's right to be heard in any matters relating to the district. Persons who wish to provide public comment will have 3 options to submit comments. Since this is a board meeting, it will be 2. Submit through an online form, request to speak during the meeting via Zoom. In order to submit through an online form, the public may submit public comments for the open or closed session on January 22nd from 11 to 3:30. Comments during this time will not be read during the meeting, but will be provided to the Board of Education. 1 public comment was provided to the board before 3:30 today. The request to speak during the meeting via Zoom is the second option. During public comment, the meeting will pause for 1 minute to take requests to speak. The raise hand function is used to take requests during the public comment period. For online attendees, please press the raise hand icon to add yourself to the queue. For phone attendees, dial *9. The speaking order will be determined based on the order of requests received. Individual speakers will be unmuted and called to speak. Communications from the audience regarding matters not on the agenda are to be made at this time.
Thank you, President Jack. We're pausing for 1 minute to take requests to speak regarding matters not on the agenda. If you'd like to make a request to speak, please press the raise hand icon or dial *9 if you're joining by phone. So we have 30 seconds remaining. Again, if you'd like to speak regarding matters not on the agenda, please press the raise hand icon or dial *9. Okay, President Jack, we have 1 request from the San Marino Teachers Association. San Marino Teachers Association, your line is now open.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I want to make a comment, and it has to do with a budgeting item. It is our understanding that our current superintendent is earning a salary as is designated and deserved. But the following year, that salary will continue regardless of whether or not Dr. Delatorre serves as our superintendent. My question is, if the district should decide to hire another superintendent, has it carefully considered the fiscal impact it will make on the district? It seems incredible that teachers and staff appear to be more fiscally responsible than our current board members, except for Mr. Kalaki, who actually questioned the amount of money that was being granted to certain groups of people. I am not calling into question any leadership. I am not saying anyone is undeserving. I am simply asking the board if they have ever so carefully considered paying over $245,000 to 2 people in the district at a time where we continually hear of financial woes. That is the only comment I have for this evening. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the public comments. We're not on the agenda.
Thank you. Now we come to matter number 7B, communications from the audience regarding matters on the consent agenda are to be made at this time.
Okay, again, we're pausing for 1 minute to take requests to speak regarding matters in the consent section. If you'd like to make a request to speak, please press the raise hand icon or dial *9. Thirty seconds remain. If you'd like to make a request to speak, please press the raise hand icon or dial *9. Okay, President Jack, we have no requests.
All right, thank you so much. Now we will go to item number 8, the consent section. Does anyone have any comments or will someone make a motion?
This is Jane. I had some questions regarding the budget adjustments in 8G. So I just wanted to clarify some of the reasons for the budget adjustments. Thank you, Stephen, for pulling that up. Okay, so on the salaries and benefits adjustments, it totaled 160. Oh, go back up. Oh, yeah. Oh, there we go. Expenditures, certificated salaries, classified salaries, employee benefits. So that total amount is 1,630,928. Can you just clarify for me what the reason is for that budget adjustment?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Did you want to go ahead or do you want me to answer?
Oh,
that?
go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll begin to answer it, and then if you need more detail, then I'll turn it over to Pearl. So that is the amount of the increase to salaries, totaling 7.7%. And so it also includes the reductions of positions. Does that help, Jane?
Yes, that does. And then if we go a little bit further down, Stephen, where it says assigned balances. Yeah, keep going. Okay, right there. So the future stabilization amount is shown as of 10/26. So I know that first column is the 10/26 as of 10/26/21, and it's listed as 3,494,000. But I thought that number was 2.7 and change when we did the assignment in September. So I'm just wondering if you can help me understand why that number is different.
It was in September 2.7, and it was on a budget revision addendum that went to the Board of Education for approval on October 26th. So the board actually did already approve that change on October 26th. Pearl, can you provide some background or?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So there was a change from that September number to later we did a budget adjustment in October. So that is reflective of that change.
Okay, great, thank you. And then in the supplies, sorry, I think we need to go back up again. Right there. So I see that the supplies, it went down by 357,000. what's that about? I always I assume that means we have more money in the budget, but I'm just wondering what.
So just based on our current expenses, we're forecasting that there will be a reduction. So this is this is trending down as we see it. And so that number reflects our forecasting the reduction.
So when we listed under supplies, what does that mean then?
Pearl, you want to expand on that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Ask your question again. I'm sorry.
I guess I'm not sure what supplies refers to then.
Supplies are every thing that paper, it could be equipment, it could be software. It's everything that are things that are in this category. So just to expand on Dr. Delatorre's response, this is a dynamic, budgets are dynamic. And so we want to make sure that we adjust according to how we see trends. And we see that we're not spending as much as we forecasted. So we're trying to right size the budget according to what our spending patterns are, so that we don't have any big surprises at the end of the year, that we're making those changes as we go along and see.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions for the 8G. I did have other questions about 8H, but if anyone else wants to stay on 8G, I'll hold off for now. Oh, Nam, you're muted.
Does anyone have any other questions with respect to 8G? If not, shall we move on to 8H?
Okay, thank you. So 8H was the ADA report. And this isn't a question so much as a request that if we could look at some of those trends in grades at some point, that would be helpful for me to understand where we're losing some of our students. And so that we can start looking at some of those reasons under it to hopefully come up with some strategies to alleviate those losses. So that one wasn't so much a question, I guess, more of a request for the future. That's it. Thank you.
Does anyone have any other questions with respect to the consent section?
Yes, I have a question regarding, I believe it would be 8D, as in dog, it would be the purchase order log. I just had a question regarding the T-Mobile USA item 16,560 on the second page. Do we know if those are for hotspots or are those for other items, if we know?
If I may respond to that, that is for some hotspots that are funded under the federal program Emergency Connectivity Fund. And those hotspots will be fully reimbursed by the federal government. So it would be ultimately no cost to the district.
Do we know if those hotspots are actually being used?
So the federal ECF fund allows districts to provide hotspots as well as laptops to students that are in need. And as far as tracking them, we have to keep them as part of the books, if you will, the inventory for 5 years. There's no other tracking of the usage of the devices. Like, in other words, we don't really know how much they are being actually used.
If we were to, if a smaller number of those hotspots were to be used, if that $16,000 went down to $5,000, for example, would the source of the funding allow that difference to then be applied to some other expenditure in the district, or is it only specifically for hotspots?
No, the actual number of hotspots was determined from a parent survey. We sent a survey out to families, and it was based on the number of respondents that said that they didn't have internet access at home that required us to proceed with that purchase. And then we seek reimbursement for the full amount.
Okay, so once it was stated by a family, for example, we need a hotspot, it's set for a 5-year period?
It's set for 5 years, and it's really an application, and we were fortunate enough to get that particular request approved. So the family can actually keep that device for 5 years, but the hotspot service itself is actually for 1 year only.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, I was just trying to see if those.
Yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't give
That's
us
not
much
being used.
flexibility. I wish there was
Good.
more creativity where we could utilize those funds for other things, but no.
Great. Okay, thank you so much.
All right, if there are no other questions, could someone make a motion to approve the consent section?
I'd like
And
to
then-
make a motion.
I second.
Mr. Chang, a second for Mrs. Chan. Roll call vote, Mr. Kalaki,
Aye.
Mr. Chang,
Aye.
Mrs. Chan,
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan,
Aye.
school board member?
Aye.
Thank you. Nam Jack, I motion passes. All right, we now go to the communication section, communications from the Board of Education. Mrs. Ryan?
Thank you, Mrs. Jack. Just one thing to report really on January 15, I worked with a PISMA, Asian Pacific Islander School Board Members Association, and we worked on various things that were, we were looking at API student achievement, how the English language learners were performing during COVID, social emotional learning, plus services that were rendered or not rendered, and mental health. So we did a retreat on the 15th, looking at data, disaggregating data on that. That's it. Thank you, Mrs. Jack.
Thank you, Mrs. Ryan. Mr. Kalaki?
Thank you. Since our last meeting, I was fortunate enough to be able to serve as a judge for the high school's debate team for their spring tournament. I also received communication from the community concerning the superintendent search, which we will be discussing later this evening. And then I also had a good discussion with a member of the PCC Board of Trustees concerning the potential expansion and challenges for that for dual enrollment at our high school.
Thank you, Mr. Kalaki. Mrs. Chan?
Yes, so I attended a LA County Office of Education LACO budget workshop. I also spoke with some community members regarding the mental health needs of our students and safety for our students, as well as other members regarding staffing issues and needs in our schools. And I also had the pleasure of attending our dance show at the high school on Friday night. It was a night of choreography, which was put on by the students. They did all of it. They choreographed it. They worked with their light and their music. And it was a really great opportunity to see the students express themselves in a way that is probably much needed right now in this time of stress. And I think for myself, I was doing a lot of reflection and conversations with people about really ensuring that no matter what we do, everything remains fixed on the kids and the students. And that I think we take it for granted that we all think we all know that's why we're here for the students. But I think it's important to constantly put that on the forefront of my mind to remember that everything is about the students and their experience and their success and their educational experiences here. That's it.
Thank you, Mrs. Chan. Mr. Chang?
Since the last school board meeting and one the Friday, I observed for the we provide vaccine clinic for the booster shot. So thank you for Stephen Choi, to coordinate this with outside pharmacy. Yeah, I think this is very good. Yeah, during the Omicron pandemic, yeah, peak, yeah. And secondly, as I know, the Huntington Library, they will have a live opera in May. So I mentioned to our superintendent, Dr. Linda Territory. So then we have a preliminary meeting. So I connect the LA Opera staff and with Dr. Territory and also our high school principal, Jason Cutterback, and also the music director. So we talk about whether there's a possibility our high school students they can participate for the orchestra and the choir. I think this a real experience. I think that the choir or orchestra member they can practice if they can. They are chosen, and then they can have the performance with LA Opera. So let's keep I will keep update. See is that any the student they will apply to perform this show. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chang. With respect to my report, I was fortunate enough to be able to attend the Carver PTA meeting, the Valentine PTA meeting, and the Huntington Middle School PTA meeting. It was wonderful. It's unbelievable to hear what they're doing, what they have done to help with the schools in terms of, being careful and being considerate. It is amazing what they've done in terms of bringing the students together with all of the different activities. And then, of course, it's amazing what they are doing and will continue to do in terms of helping our district with respect to finances and funding various positions and activities. So that is my report. So now we go to 9B, communications from the superintendent, Dr. Delatorre.
Thank you, President Jack, members of the Board of Education. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Richter, who recently worked with Gender Spectrum to bring some high quality training to our district's leadership team. That was last Friday. It was time well spent with the team. This is a company who works really hard to create gender sensitive and inclusive environments for all of our students and teens. So we did go through part one of a 2-part training series. And we are looking forward to finding creative ways to bring this training to our teachers. And ultimately, we'd like to provide similar training to our students. We need to be on top of making sure that we are creating a safe and inclusive environment for all students and staff members. And this certainly is a step in the right direction. So kudos to Dr. Richter for doing that research and bringing that company to the leadership team. I'd also like to, of course, thank Dr. Stephen Choi for his leadership in, again, bringing us another opportunity to get boosted. I think it's really important that everybody continue to take all measures available to them to be safe in this environment. And it was a successful event. Lots and lots of people did receive their booster, and we are going to continue to provide those opportunities for students and staff members in the future. Going back to just the work that Mr. Chang has done, it's just been remarkable through his connections. He mentioned this to you during his comments. He's been able to connect us with the LA Opera. And this is a wonderful, amazing, unique opportunity for our students at Huntington Middle School and the high school to play alongside professional musicians from this LA Opera. And it is just going to be a wonderful opportunity and event at the Huntington that I hope that all of you will take the time to come out and support our students when it actually happens and watch them in action, because it's just a wonderful thing that we're doing for our students. And I don't think that that would have been possible without Mr. C. Joseph Chang's connection. So thank you, kind sir, for making that happen. Additionally, I just would like to say that unfortunately found it necessary to postpone the district's state of the address. And we're looking forward to being able to bring to our community, our parents, our families, and our staff members a lot of really important information on Wednesday, February 2nd. We look forward to seeing you all at that event. It will be held at the same venue at the Huntington Middle School Auditorium from 6 to 8 p.m. We were originally looking at January 31st, which is next Monday, until we realized that that is the Lunar New Year, New Year's Eve, and lots of our families are going to be home together celebrating the Year of the Tiger. So I'm sure that's going to be a great year. I hear that we're going to have lots of luck in the upcoming Year of the Tiger. So looking forward to celebrating alongside all of our families. Dr. Richter and I attended the governor's budget conference, and we received lots of very valuable information. And I just want to share briefly with you that while we're continuing to predict steady declines in enrollment, that we are going to receive a projected COLA of 5.3%. That is good news and will help us to offset any reductions in revenue due to declining enrollment. And also, there was no safe harbor for the increased costs that we will experience due to the employer portion of retirement contributions. So I think that the 5.3% is going to help us with that. And as the board is aware, the district normally receives state funding based on the current or prior year's P2 ADA. During the pandemic, however, we've had a hold harmless, which means that we were actually able to receive the same amount of funding that we did based on our 2018-19 P2 ADA. So for the past 2 years, we have not seen a decline in our revenue based on enrollment. So what the governor is proposing for next year is sort of a compromise. He's looking at a 3-year rolling average, which I think it will be helpful for many, many districts in the state of California in terms of just giving them a softer landing, as opposed to what we were predicting with the funding cliff. Going from our 2018-19 numbers to 2022-23 with no cushion would be, I think, very detrimental for lots of districts that are in declining enrollment. This doesn't, make us completely whole, but it certainly gives us a much softer landing. And I'm sure that our wonderful CBO consultant, Mrs. Pearl Izuka, is going to have lots more to say about that during her presentation, so I don't want to steal her thunder. But my point is to the Board of Education that things are looking good next year in terms of us being fiscally solvent in the 22-23 school year, all things considered. So I just wanted to share that bit of good news, and I'm sure that Pearl will expand on that. That's it. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Delatorre. 9C, communications from our wonderful student board member, Karen Hyun. Karen?
No updates from me. I haven't been out of the house much.
Well, we are lucky to have you here tonight.
Yes.
All right, number 10, communications from the audience regarding matters on the information on the agenda. Communications from the audience regarding matters on the agenda are to be made at this, on the information agenda are to be made at this time. Dr. Choi?
Thank you, President Jack. We are pausing for 1 minute to take the request to speak regarding the information items on the agenda. If you'd like to make a request to speak, please press the raise hand icon or dial *9. Again, we have 30 seconds remaining. If you'd like to make a request to speak regarding the information items, please press the raise hand icon or dial *9. Okay, we have one request from Marguerite Lindsay. Marguerite, your line is now on.
Good evening, President Jack, board members, student board member, and district cabinet. This evening, my comment is regarding agenda item 11B, superintendent search timeline. I would like to reaffirm that the board should continue past practices and have a competitive search for a new superintendent vetted by a third party. This search would ensure a full and impartial vetting process, thus protecting all stakeholders, students, teachers, parents, its future superintendent, as well as the board. Also, stakeholders should be able to give input to update the current superintendent profile. Finally, the board and the community should decide if it is a priority to hire a superintendent that has a teaching credential and has teaching experience. Thank you for your time this evening.
Okay, thank you. And that concludes our public comments for information items.
All right, now we go to matter number 11, information item. 11A, governor's budget update. This is Pearl Azuka.
Good evening, board members, superintendent and cabinet, members of the public. Thank you for this opportunity to give you a quick update on the governor's budget. And I'm going to say upfront that a lot of this presentation came from School Services of California. They allowed us to share their presentation with you tonight. And so most of the slides that you'll see are from that presentation. As Dr. Delatorre said, just generally, it's a good news. However, we're seeing a couple of themes with this governor that we're starting to move towards more categorical kinds of programs, where in the past with Governor Brown, he was more interested in funding LCFF. This particular governor has decided to have one-time kind of programs and categorical, so we're seeing that. Although we do have good news about this COLA of 5.33%, as Dr. Delatorre mentioned, it covers some of the costs, and I'll share with you later, of what the district will continue to experience. So Dr. Choi, next slide. So these are some highlights of the budget. As we heard, there's a general robust revenues for this coming year projected, and it's due to the 3 taxes of California: personal income tax, sales and use, and corporate taxes. We're seeing a tremendous increases in the personal income tax, and this is what's creating the surplus within this year's budget. This budget has gave the ability for the governor to put money into the rainy day fund as well as into the school's stabilization account. Next slide, please. And although there seems to be some positive indicators, there's still economic uncertainty due to COVID. So we're also want to be mindful of that and not get too excited, because with all of the COVID, there comes unpredictability of other costs that may have not been considered. So we do have to also remember that in our minds. as well as this cost of living increase will also have to help us deal with the inflation that we're starting to experience. Goods and services have gone up, and we also, with the COLA that we're going to be receiving, will need to address that as well. Next slide. So yes, next slide, please. So this again are the three big taxes. 95% of our income comes from personal income tax, sales and use tax, and corporate tax. So the yellow bar is what the Legislative Analyst's Office forecast is, and the gray bar is what the governor is projecting. So they're pretty close in terms of their predictions. And you can see that for the most part, most of the 70% of the personal income tax is what contributes to the general revenue for the state. And when we come, we'll be back with you in May with the governor's revise, and that will be after the taxes of April 15th are filed, and we'll have a better feel for how the year is going. We'll see how these three taxes show up at that time, and whether the prediction of the COLA that was presented will continue to be at that number or maybe increase even further. We'll see. Next slide. So when we look at the governor's budget, we have to remember that almost 40% of the state budget goes to schools. And we're looking at funding through the local control funding formula. And in that formula, these are the components that make up what the total dollar amount is. First of all, we get an adjustment for grades K through 3 and grades 9 through 12. We get an extra 10.4 and 2.6% correspondingly. And that's the incentive to keep the class sizes smaller and to pay for that ability to have that. And then there is the COLA. And we've talked about this 5.33 that is based on a calculation written into law, actually, as to how that is to be calculated. And then we also look at the district's unduplicated count on those that are enrolled as English learners or are considered are eligible for a free or reduced meal foster youth. And those students also give us a certain dollar amount. And also we are able to get supplemental and concentration grant monies. All of those components make up how we are funded at LCFF. So the next slide gives you the actual dollars that we're looking at for next year. So you can see that every grade level has a little bit different amount, because the thinking is that for the high school student, it costs more to educate that student. So the dollar per student is actually higher. And you can see what the COLA at 5.33 does. It increases each one of those levels by that percentage to give us the new grant base funding for each of those grade levels there. So you can see K through 3 is 85, 4 through 6 grades, 86, 8909 for 7th and 8th, and then high school 10,233.24. And then again, to that, we add those percentages for those grade span adjustments. And then that gives us the total for each grade level based on average daily attendance, how much we would get for each one of those students. And then to add to that, we do have supplemental grants that we have, not a whole lot, but we do have some, and we add those dollars amounts as well. So on the next slide, I just wanted to share that this is the dartboard. It's known by all those that do budget planning for school districts, that these are the assumptions that we will make for the coming years. And when we do a budget, both at the second interim and as well as when we bring the budget in June, we will use the dartboard of either school services or LA County Office of Education, which is pretty much in line with what school services has given to us. And we will use these percentages to assume for revenue for next year and the next 2 years out. So you can see this year is 5.07%, next year 5.33, and so forth. You can see the years out. Those are the COLAs we will be using. But also I wanted to show that the CalSTRS, which is the State Teachers Retirement System, and CalPERS, which is the Public Employees Retirement System, those percentages are also going up. And so those costs to us, the district, has to be paid for through that COLA that you see there. So our net is, after we look at that as well as all the other costs that are involved in the district, that's what that COLA has to pay for and cover. Unemployment insurance, because of all of the situation with COVID, has gone up. Hopefully by 23, 24, we'll see that go in half. But in the meantime, we still have to budget for that increase as well. So on the next slide, what I did is I took the average for all grades and multiplied it by what we're projecting for ADA next year. And this is our total revenue that we're projecting for LCFF. Again, the numbers will be more exact as we get closer to budgeting. This is just a rough estimate. And this is about $561,000 more than what we presented to you at first interim in the multi-year projection for next year. So I know that's a question that some of you may have, is what does the impact for this increased COLA will be for next year? Okay, next slide. And Dr. Delatorre already spoke about this, that we actually, the governor is sort of jumping on the bandwagon here because there's been several forms of legislation to try to deal with funding cliff. We know that our local legislator has a potential a law or a bill in place to deal with enrollment. The governor's, though, is based on average daily attendance. And but I've noticed that there are other legislators who are also have ideas and concepts as to how school districts can deal with this funding cliff that we're going to all be facing. But as Dr. Delatorre mentioned, this proposal from the governor is taking a look at an average over 3 years, which will help this district a lot, because that way our funding cliff won't be as drastic, but will give us a softer landing. We will still plan to make the reductions that we need to do as we projected in the multi-year, and that will help us in the years out going forward. But the pressure to be absolute in terms of numbers for next year is a little bit, if this goes forward, will help us. Okay, the next slide. I won't go into this, but this is just a listing. Again, as I mentioned in the onset, that this is a new era. Prior to LCFF, we had like 50, 60 categorical programs, and each one of them had their own reporting. And we were so happy when LCFF came because all that went away. But now these are starting to creep in. So now we're starting to see more of these categorical programs. And although we have yet to actually dive in and actually decide which ones we're going to, implement and look into deeply, we know that these are out there and we're going to study that. And that's going to be our work in the next couple of months to determine which one of these we would like to move forward with. Next slide. And this is just a listing of the passion. This and the next slide will show the passion of this governor who's interested in childcare and preschool. And these are the different programs and the dollars that he has put into these programs. And again, we'll look into these and see which ones work for our district, but you can kind of get a flavor for his interests and what's important to him. Next slide. The Universal Meals Program, where there's no choice, there's no waiver. Every school district, in order to get reimbursed for their lunch, must provide a breakfast. as well as lunch to every student in the school district. And there has been funding for that. We don't think it might be quite enough. We're still trying to evaluate that, but there are dollars in there to help with those school districts that are needing to, who have not served breakfast before or have not had this program in place, and getting that ramped up and ready to go. And then the last program that he has an interest in, and this is good news, is special ed. We're seeing that there has been the COLA, and the base rate is also going up for next year. You can see that every year it's gone up a little, but we see a pretty substantial increase for next year. And I think the funding mechanism is going to go through based on the school district, and it'll go through our SELPA, but the funding will be increased anyways for the following year, which is good news. So here are our next steps. We'll continue to evaluate student enrollment and staffing. Next month, we will get our audit. This is talking about this year's budget. We will also, by March 15th, present you with the second interim. And that will be a good time for us to present numbers, because it'll be the actuals for the half of the year. So we'll have a good idea how the rest of the second half will go. And then we will bring your adoption of the actuals, what we estimate how we're going to end this year, along with the budget for next year. And then finally, on our last is how we're going to plan for next year's budget. We're continuing to meet with our leadership to determine staffing. We're continuing looking at this governor's proposal, as well as the potential programs. We will have budget study sessions. We will be bringing some reductions for the next year. As we had mentioned to you in the past, we're still needing to make some changes there, unfortunately. And then in May, we're going to have the governor's revise, and he'll update his numbers, and we'll have a better idea on the financial situation in California. And then in June, we'll bring forward the adopted budget along with the LCAP for next year. So with that, thank you for your attention, and I'll take your questions at this time if you have any.
I have a question about the lunch program. So currently, is that we still provide outside for the lunch?
Yes.
And is that the quantity is that increase or decrease compared to the last year?
It's increased. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
And also, if we want to provide breakfast, so what is the time? What time?
That's we're going to have to work out with the school sites as to what's the best time. We're hoping that we'll be allowed during before school, and we're hoping that for the elementaries, and that we can work something in during in between bell schedules or during a break, a nutrition break, but that will be worked out with the individual principals as to the timing of breakfast.
Thank you.
I ask a question on the COLA. I think you said it was 5.3%, correct? Is that a one-time increase, or does that increase it long term? In other words, is it 5.3% just for this next year, or does that 5.3% increase continue on every year?
No, it's just for this next year, because the following year it may be more or less. As you can see, at the dartboard has 3.6 the following year, so it's 1 year.
Thank you.
I had a few questions. So I was looking at the governor's budget workshop too, and I was wondering, in terms of, because Governor Newsom is so focused and on early childhood, what are our TK numbers right now? And what are we anticipating? Do we have any idea of what to anticipate next year? And I know that part of wrapped into that is a very severe student teacher ratio factored into that. So I'm just wondering how that's going to look for us, and whether or not that's something we want to expand. And if we do, are we looking at recruiting, from other preschools? And I know that you said that you're going to be looking at everything, so you might not have an answer right now around that, but if you have any ideas, that would be great to hear.
So I will have to defer to Dr. Delatorre and Dr. Richter to respond to that. I'm sorry, I think they'll be best to respond.
So, Mrs. Chan, I can't give you exact numbers in terms of the TK enrollment at both schools, but I do know that those are very healthy numbers. As a matter of fact, I was just speaking with Mrs. Jiang last week, and she said that we were getting another student enrolled in TK. So I want to say that they're probably anywhere from 18 to 22 per school site. Do you think that sounds right, Dr. Richter?
I am seeing if I can pull that information up right now.
Okay, so while she's pulling that up, part of your question, I believe, was, are we looking at expanding that? One of the governor's proposals is universal pre-K. And so I do believe that there's going to be momentum for us to expand that if the enrollment is there. And of course, the challenge will be finding the appropriate space to house those kiddos, because classrooms that house the younger students have different requirements than regular classrooms do. And so we'll just need to really monitor our incoming numbers for next year, which we never, with the cohort model, you roll numbers up, but obviously we don't know what those numbers are going to be coming into TK. And we're in a unique environment in that we don't have apartments, townhomes, condos, new construction. We don't have a lot of the tools that other communities have to try and predict what their enrollment's going to be in TK or kinder. So we have to basically look at our past numbers for the last 5 years. And we usually come up with an average and assume that it's going to be the same, but there's lots of variables in a pandemic environment that we can't predict. So we're hoping that our numbers will continue to be strong. We have talked about having coffees and going out and talking with young families in the community and the surrounding communities to try and get them interested in San Marino schools. Also looking at some marketing materials that can be distributed. That's one of the reasons that we have connected with Mr. Ferran and have him on contract, is to look at marketing materials and see whether or not, we can, create a really nice trifold that we give to new and prospective families to advertise the services and support that we're going to be able to provide in TK. And hopefully there's going to be some funding in the future to support those programs going forward. I think it's a great thing. I really do. I believe in early education. All the research really demonstrates that, kids are more successful in their academic careers long-term when they have had, pre-K education. So we are certainly looking to do what we can to support that initiative going forward, and we'll keep you apprised.
Do we have a sense of whether or not, I know that in the last year, a lot of the kindergarten numbers came down because people were not enrolling their children in public school with kindergarten not being compulsory. Have those numbers rebounded for us this year?
Linda, do you have those numbers up now?
I do. And so Board Member Chong, going back to your first question about transitional kindergarten, we currently have 21 at one school, and we have 22 at the other elementary school.
So those are very solid numbers at TK.
They are. Yeah. And when we're looking at our kindergarten numbers, we do have robust numbers across the board in kindergarten this year as well. And this is the most current enrollment update.
Great. Thank you.
And also Pearl, forgive me if you've already touched on this, but the governor is also proposing that there's a 12-to-1 TK ratio going forward. And I did clarify that with School Services of California. That's not necessarily 12 kiddos to one teacher. It's just 12 kids to one adult. So if you have a teacher and an aide in the classroom, you can have up to 24 kids. But you do need to have that second adult in the classroom in order to comply with that ratio requirement. Am I getting that right, Pearl?
And that's not currently the ratio that we employ, right?
No, but we do have aides in both of those classrooms, as I understand it, right, Dr. Richter? Yeah. So we understand that developmentally, those children need more assistance at that age. And we want to make sure that we have, proper supervision and enough adults in the classroom to be able to manage the needs of those kids at that age.
And then I have a broader question. Given that a lot of that is categorical funding, is the issue, typically what is the problem for us in San Marino is that we don't have the high number of unduplicated students to qualify for a lot of programs, or they are competitive grants, and we are not a low income area. So we typically don't get these grants. We get passed over. I didn't read the fine print. Are we looking at some of those categorical monies sort of being dispersed like that again, where they look really great, but when you get into the details, they're not really monies that we're going to be able to access?
We're both nodding in affirmation because you just did a beautiful job of describing our reality, which is, and we, believe me when I tell you, we've applied for a lot of different grants because they look like they're amazing and they would really benefit the school district, but we don't often get awarded because we have such a low unduplicated count number, and they don't see San Marino as really needing those programs and that type of support, even though we really do need all of that support. So it's been frustrating for us to not be successful when we spend a lot of time and energy in applying for those grants and do a lot of research and package it all very nicely, send it off, and then we get a big fat no in return. So now we're being more careful on which grants we will apply for and which grants we won't, because we just know that we're not going to get it.
Right. A lot of the grants are, what they'll do is give it to the districts first that have the higher percentages, and then if there's anything left, then the rest, so it goes, unfortunately, that's kind of the way it also goes.
Yeah.
And our unduplicated count is about what percent?
Do you have the current number? I want to say it was around, it's kind of gone back and forth between 12 and 16%, I thought.
That's what
I don't know where we are today, right now.
Right now we're not collecting applications.
Right,
so
that's why we don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, well, we'll get back to you on that.
Yes.
I remember it being somewhere in that teens range, but I couldn't remember exactly. So, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So on the governor budget update, did they mention about the mental health or the wellness funding possible?
I don't recall that at all.
I don't think they mentioned it in terms of additional monies being available to support that. I think there was conversation about, how districts recognize that as being, a fundamental need. But most districts are having to fund that unless they have a special grant or program that they qualify for on their own.
Or they're using COVID dollars
Right.
to address it now, but there's not any long-term plan.
Right.
So the last year, the CSBA conference, so I think the last section for the political talk, so they mentioned about the mental health will be in the higher priority. Yeah. So they even thinking about maybe can utilize the insurance model, do the managed care to low cost for the spending. Yeah. So that's the one I heard at the CSBA conference.
Well, it could change by May revise. It's hard to say, and you know, the legislature also gets involved with the final budget that gets adopted by the state. So I think that if there's enough pressure from all the constituents at the legislature, you might see some trailer bills to attach to the budget as well. So.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Now that we've concluded 11A, and thank you, Mrs. Azuka, for your wonderful update. We look forward to hearing more in the next coming months. We're now going to 11B, Superintendent Search Timeline. Dr. Delatorre.
Thank you, President Jack, members of the Board of Education, student board member, and executive team. This evening, as promised, I am going to provide the Board of Education with information on a superintendent search and a draft timeline. Please go to the second slide. Thank you so much. So what I have before you are the main firms that are available to work with the school district to secure your next superintendent. These firms are very reputable, have been around for a long time. The Costco Group has been around a long time. CSBA, that's California School Boards Association, they do superintendent searches. And I know that they've been highly successful in that endeavor. Hazard, Young, and Associates, they will do nationwide, so they will extend beyond California. I think most of these firms will, but I know that Hazard, Young, and Associates has a lot of experience in that area. JG Consulting is the firm that most recently assisted San Marino Unified School District in securing Dr. Jeff Wilson. And this is a Texas-based firm. So they do a lot of work in Texas. They have done work in California. And Dr. Michael Escalante was partnering with Mr. Guerrera of JG Consulting in the past, but Dr. Escalante has retired and is no longer working with JG Consulting. But having said that, they are continuing to do executive searches, and alongside of that, they will do superintendent searches as well. Most of you are familiar with Leadership Associates. That's a firm that is very, very popular in California. This is a firm that employs retired superintendents to do this important work. And they have helped our school district, I want to say, with at least three superintendent searches in the past. So they are very familiar with San Marino. They're familiar with the community and the various dynamics. McPherson and Jacobson is a company that's been around a long time. And then we have Ray and Associates. And so what I'm going to be doing is packaging information on all of these firms, and I will send that to the Board of Education. I'm going to be sending a request for quote to each of these firms to see if they're interested in working with the San Marino Unified School District Board of Education. So to be clear, the school district's role in this search, if the board decides to go with a search firm, is simply to provide support to the professional search firm that is selected by the Board of Education. So the district is just going to support and assist. But if you hire a firm, they're going to take this entire project on. And I'm going to show you a timeline that illustrates, and I'm going to walk you through this step by step so you know exactly what it's going to look like. And I want to emphasize that this is a draft timeline. There's a lot of variables. I know that in public education and a lot of other industries, there's a staffing shortage. And I'm sure that this has impacted search firms as well. So it's been my experience over the years that when you submit a request for quote, they usually get back to you in a week and a half. But it may take a little bit longer in the current environment, depending on what their staffing is like. So I do know also, because I went to EdJoin today, there are lots of superintendent vacancies out there. And there will continue to be more. So there's going to be just a lot of districts with vacancies out there. So that might slow things down for the search firm as well. But nonetheless, we're right where we need to be in terms of time. And the draft schedule, as I walk you through it, gives you ample time to get through all of the stages of a high quality search, so that you can hire a new superintendent that can begin working July 1st. And you should be positioned to be able to make an offer to a new superintendent in late April, early May, and you should be able to announce it to the public in May. And again, our school year runs through the end of May, so that is perfectly aligned with our school year. All right, let's go to the next slide, please, Dr. Choi. So here's part one of our proposed timeline. So today is January 25th. I am providing the Board of Education with a presentation on the superintendent search process and timeline. So I'm going to walk you through this in the form of a timeline so that you know what to expect, how long it should take, and what the process is going to look like. So January 26th through the 28th, which is the latter part of this week, the district is going to be working on sending out those RFQs to these companies. And then they will likely take a week and a half to 2 weeks to respond. So by February 8th, those responsive search firms should be interviewed by the Board of Education, and a search firm should be subsequently selected by the board. And all of that is done in open session. And that's what we've done in the past. So it's a very transparent process. By approximately February 15th, there should be an initial search planning meeting that would be held between the Board of Education and the search firm that is selected, wherein they come in, they talk with the board about what is it that you're looking for, what are you trying to achieve, what's your budget like in terms of compensation packages, are you looking for somebody to stay long-term? What are your goals in terms of the search process? And you'll be sharing that with your consultants. Typically, there's at least 2 consultants that will be assigned to the Board of Education to work with you and do all the legwork in terms of preparing to have a really good, successful process. So once you go through the initial planning meeting, that company will come up with its own far more accurate timeline in terms of what they're going to be doing. So, and this is modeled after like the last 3 searches that we have done. So this is very standard and subject to change, but not drastically. So February 23rd, 24th, and 25th, it usually takes them 2 to 3 days to schedule interviews. They're going to want to meet with people from the city. They're going to want to meet with your union presidents. They're going to want to meet with principals at each of the schools. They're going to want to meet with your cabinet. They're going to want to meet with a variety of different, what they call key stakeholders in the community. They're going to want to meet with the PTA council president. They'll want to meet with the schools foundation, with someone from City Club, Rotary, the city of San Marino. They're likely going to want to meet with the city manager and the mayor. So they will give you a list of stakeholders, and the board will ultimately decide how to guide that process. But what they do is they would work through like Jennifer Delatorre, unless they have their own staff to be able to set up all of these appointments and put them into a calendar. And they will come in and they basically ask the key stakeholders, what do you hope to see in your new superintendent? Typically, they're looking at the personal qualities and characteristics desired in your new superintendent. What qualifications do you feel are really important and highly desirable in your new superintendent? And what do you think the challenges of the job will be for this new person coming in under the current circumstances? What kind of challenges will they face? Will they face challenges in terms of the finances? Will they face challenges in terms of implementing new programs? Will they face challenges in terms of, I don't know, any kind of crisis you can imagine that a superintendent would struggle with. They're going to be asking, key stakeholders if they think that that would be a reality for the new person. And part of the reason they're asking those questions is to determine what the profile should be of the candidate that they're looking for. Are you looking for somebody who's very strong in instruction? In some districts where they have issues and they need somebody to come in and create a stronger instructional program, they will want somebody with a strong instructional background. If you're coming into a district that has a lot of financial concerns, oftentimes they want somebody who's had experience with budget. Does the person need to have central district office experience, or are you just looking for somebody that's coming up from possibly another a college or a university instead of a district? What are you looking for? And their process of gathering all of this data is important, because they're going to put that into a report that is shared with the Board of Education, and the board will review that, and the board has an opportunity to provide its own thoughts and ideas and suggestions and recommendations on what it is that they feel is important and what they're looking for. And that ultimately works itself into a district superintendent profile and position description that is ultimately used to recruit a new candidate or candidates for this position. And they take that data and they put it into a profile, they create a job description, and then that's what they use to send out and advertise the position. And of course, the board all along has the opportunity and oversight capabilities to be able to review this information, provide its input, and provide feedback to the search firm as you go along. The position is usually posted in EdJoin or EdCal, EdCal, which is an AXA publication. That's one of the most popular places that you can advertise for a superintendent. If you're going national, you can advertise in a lot of different national publications, the National School Boards Association. You can, put this into a variety of different professional publications that superintendents would read. Also, you're dealing with search firms that know candidates. Oftentimes they will have their own pool of candidates to pull from. They know their social capacities, they know their intellectual capacities, they know what their experience is, how well they would do in a high performing district as opposed to, a lower performing district. What are their areas of expertise and how well does that match up with San Marino's profile? So you want to find a firm that is really very up to date on candidates that are out there. They know, where to look and how to find them. Oftentimes these recruiters will place phone calls to sitting superintendents, if that's what you're looking for, and say, hey, are you interested? There's this wonderful opportunity in San Marino. Let me tell you about it. And so you have a lot of opportunity to find somebody who's really, really good through recruiters who are skilled in that area. So you want to make sure you've got the right firm with the right people who have a track record of being successful in their searches. The other thing is you're going to want to make sure that they can present the board with some evidence that when they placed a superintendent, the superintendent has been there for their full contract. If you have a search firm that brings a superintendent to you who's only going to be here for a year or two, that kind of turnover can be expensive long-term. So you want to make sure that the search firm has a long-standing track record of being successful in placing superintendents who stay. So on February 28th, you're sending out a publication, you're distributing the information about the position. It becomes open and it's out there in the public. So around March 7th through the 25th, that's when you're receiving applications. And when I say you, it's the search firm that receives the application, not the district. District is not going to be getting applications from superintendent candidates. It would be the search firm. So I just want to make that crystal clear. We're not getting any of that information. It is my recommendation. I think it would be most superintendents' recommendations and most search firm recommendations to have a closed process. What I mean by that is that these candidates are protected, their confidentiality is protected until you're ready to make an offer. There are a lot of sitting superintendents who would not participate in a competitive process if they had to make it public. And so you might want to keep that in mind and be sure and ask the companies what they think about that. I'm pretty sure they're going to give you the same advice. So the company is going to receive the applications. They will make the phone calls. They're going to do like an initial screening. Also, they're going to want the board members to be involved in screening. And the board can approach this one of two ways. The board can either identify a subcommittee of the board to work with the firm, or all 5 board members can work with the firm. But when you do that, every time all 5 board members are going to be in a conversation with the search firm, it has to be agendized as a meeting. That can get tricky because there are some personnel safe harbors and exceptions to the Brown Act that could be discussed in a closed session meeting, but nonetheless, it still has to be an agendized meeting one way or the other, depending on what it is you guys are talking about. But the search firms can guide you on that and talk you through that. But when the time comes, you'll need to make that decision as well. Dr. Choi, can you go to the next slide, please? Around March 28th, there will be selection of candidates to be interviewed. The interview is usually held off-site, but in the community, because again, it has to be agendized as a board meeting, these interviews, and you can do it, I believe, in closed session, but you still have to agendize it. They're typically held on Saturdays and Sundays, just so you know, and this is entirely up to the board. The board can do whatever it wants. But in my experience, we've done this before on weekends. The first round interview takes place on a Saturday. And then if you have candidates, this is especially important if you go nationwide. If you have candidates that are from out of state and had to fly here and possibly stay overnight, you don't want them to have to come back more than once necessarily. So you could, make a determination at the end of the day on Saturday after you've interviewed X number of candidates to have the recruiters call maybe 2 of them and say, could you stay overnight? Because we want to bring you back for a second interview tomorrow. And then those candidates come back on Sunday, they interview with the board again, and then the board will deliberate and determine whether or not they want to offer a position to one of the finalists or the finalists, depending on how it goes. And then you begin to engage in negotiation of contract. So that, usually will go well. You also want to make sure that the consultants that you hire have some skills in supporting the board in negotiating the contract, because you don't want to have that go on for too long, because you lose candidates that way. So if you can make sure that the search firm is good in that area as well, it'd be very beneficial to the board. Around May 19th, there's an announcement made at an open session Board of Education meeting. We found this great, wonderful new superintendent. This is his or her name. And then that superintendent would begin his or her assignment on July 1st, 2022. So that in a nutshell is the timeline. Stephen, can you go to the next slide? I think, yeah, we're open for questions now. I hope that was helpful.
Yes, Linda, that was very helpful. Thank you very much. We are now open for questions. Does anyone have any questions?
No, I just wanted to say thank you to Dr. Delatorre. I thought that in my decade of being on the school board, well, actually, this is my 9th year, I really found that your coverage of kind of how to anticipate the timeline and how to address some issues that we may be dealing with, it was done very well. I think for the newer board members, it helps to helps to bring clarity to what their task is. And thank you so much for the preparation on this. I thought was very well done. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ryan.
Okay. With no question. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chang?
Yeah, by the way, thank you for Dr. Territory prepare for this the information. I think is very thorough. Yeah, when the Sherry Ryan mentioned about 1 decade, I think I'm doing the 2 decade. Oh, I also interviewed probably most of the candidate and finally became the superintendent for last 20 years. So I think this is the good, I think transparent and then put in the agenda. But I'm just talk about my personal point of view. You know, to run a school district just like run a country, okay, or run a company. So we need to know what is our goal. So I think the goal is we want to get suitable the candidate and then take a leadership, eventually make a school district better and better. That's the goal. But I witnessed for the last 20 years, yes, we always make every effort, time and effort, trying to recruit the best one. But once we recruit them in, but you know, it's not or we will give them so many years, 1 year or 2 years. But eventually, I think most of case, I think more than not more than the 3 years, and then they choose to leave. So end up we need to think about in the Board of Education level, in the school district staff, in the student and the parent, and the teacher union, and we need to think about what we can provide a very positive environment for the next leader and can stay with us, because this is the most important. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chang.
Thank you, Mr. Chang. And thank you, Superintendent Delatorre. It was a very thorough, understandable process, and I think it really will provide us, a wonderful pathway. So again, thank you for all your efforts and everything you do. Thank you.
You're most welcome.
Sorry, I just wanted to point out something. I think CSBA partnered with Mac and Jake.
Oh, maybe, yeah, they did. They actually, yes.
Yeah, so you can knock that one off your,
yeah,
you can knock that off your list of
or just combine them, right?
Yeah. And then so on that list you had what, about 7?
Yeah, can we go back, Steve?
Okay, so you had 1, 2, 3,
6, because you're going to combine McPherson with CSBA.
Right. So JG Consulting, I'm not sure if we, I'm not saying we do or we don't send it out to them, but I just did read that I think something like 8 districts in North Texas have lost or losing their superintendent this year. So I'm not sure how helpful a search firm in Texas with JG Consulting will be for us. So, and I say that only because I'm leading into my next question. So given that there are really essentially 6 of these groups out there, and given that there are a lot of superintendents moving around right now during this period of the Great Resignation, how many, if you can venture a guess, that I won't hold you to, but how many of these 6 do you think will actually come back to us with an RFQ?
I think maybe 3 to 4.
Okay.
That's what I'm thinking. And so I'm thinking that it'll be a manageable number for you guys to interview in open session without having to go through this rigorous like screening process. I mean, any one of these firms can do a good job. It's just finding the right fit for the board because they've all had pretty successful track records. And JG Consulting, I think, is just it's kind of an outlier. And the reason that I chose to include that company is because they were the company that brought Dr. Wilson to us, and they did a great job. One of the things that they had that the other companies did not have was a technology tool that allowed the Board of Education to view each of the candidates prior to them being interviewed, responding to a prompt. And that helped the board decide who they wanted to interview and who they didn't want to interview. And none of the other companies had that technology tool. So I think that kind of gave them the edge. And then Dr. Escalante, who is now retired, is a very big name in public education and was well known and used to work for Leadership Associates, used to be the superintendent in some very large districts. Glendale was the most recent before he retired. And so he was a known, California expert. And so I think that's why the board chose to go with that firm last time, but it's up to the board whether or not you want to go out to JG Consulting. He also, Mr. Guerrera, serves on, or at least he did back then, the education board that is owned by the Bill Gates Foundation. And so he was rubbing shoulders with some, very big names. And so that was another thing that, he's just very well connected in the field of education. But if you guys want me to take him off, I'm happy to take him off and we can just look at, the other firms.
I wasn't suggesting that. I was just kind of trying to get a sense of what to really expect. So
and he
and
may
then
say no anyway. I mean, he might say no anyway, because there's travel expenses to come out here.
Well, so that was my other question was, when we interview them, are we going to be interviewing them virtually?
It depends on where we're at in the pandemic, I would imagine, and what they're comfortable with. In the past, we've done it in the boardroom in person.
So these are, the rest of them are all local groups?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah, they would be able to come down here. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. That was very thorough and consistent with, the best practices and consistent with the information that we were given earlier last year as well. So this was very helpful. Thank you.
Great. You're more than welcome.
So Linda, so Dr. Delatorre, I think, in light of the fact we may only get, 3 or 4, as you said, is a manageable number, but let's put out a wide net and see what comes out in terms of the RFQ, and then we'll get a chance to review it again in 2 weeks. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
If I could ask a few questions, I guess that I'm trying to understand how many search firms are there that are out there that do this?
Well, you're looking at the major players up on that screen. Those are the major players.
Okay, is there, I guess the question I have is, who would be the person at the district that would be the contact for the search firm during the search?
I would leave that up to the board. I would leave that up to the board and the board president to decide who that is. Normally, they work a lot with the person in Jennifer Delatorre's position.
Okay.
And the board president, and they're going to be contacting Mrs. Jack for a lot of things. So they use the administrative assistant to the superintendent for logistical things. Can you reserve this space? Can you set up these interviews? Can you call these people? And then they would be going through President Jack for any issues related to making decisions on anything from, where they're advertising or how many people they want to be interviewed as community stakeholders, who those community stakeholders are. That's all going to go through the board.
Okay, so
the last one, we choose the Dr. Wilson. The year Lisa Linger was the president, so she almost like fully, as the contact person. Yeah.
I'm personally not familiar with the number of search firms and if there's others that are out there that would also be viable candidates.
Mhm.
My thought is to make sure that we're having a credible and independent and transparent search that minimizes opportunity for any criticism, whether it's legitimate or not. We want to make sure that each of the stakeholders in our community feel that things were done correctly. And I'm not trying to indicate that they're not in any way. I think that a search is a very important thing to do. But it's important that there be that transparency. And so what I'm trying to figure out is if there's somebody, I guess I'm glad to hear that it would be Jennifer De La Torre or somebody that would be that contact along with the board president. I'm just trying to see if there's other search firms as well that should possibly be considered.
Not really. And if you could, as a board member, contact California School Boards Association to ask them if they know of any other firms. That's basically, I mean, I've had 30 years of experience in this, and these are the firms that are very reputable and well-known by people in education. There are executive search firms that really don't have a lot of experience with superintendent positions out there. It's entirely up to the board what you guys would like to do. I'm happy to make it happen for you. So if you can find, other companies that you'd like to work with, I can send the RFQ out to them as well. It doesn't matter to me at all. I'm completely objective in this process.
I appreciate that. I think that, that may be good. I will definitely reach out to CSBA to see,
Sure.
and because I think the goal is not just to have a transparent process and a process that is credible, but perhaps as equally important to make sure that the community believes that the process was transparent and credible. We want to make sure that there's that confidence in whoever that superintendent is going to be. And so, but at this point, you're saying at this point, as far as timeline, there's no issue with things being rushed or crammed for time. It would be a perfect amount of time to be able to start that search if we're doing that at this time.
That's what I believe to be true based on my experience. Yes.
Okay, great. I do, I take to heart the comments that Marguerite Lindsay had stated earlier, and I think that is important. So I agree with those concerns. I do think that we should start that process now, and I think that we should, the board should definitely put a lot of thought into a wide net of stakeholders that are going to be able to have input in this process. So I would definitely support starting that search at this time.
Okay, if we're done with questions and comments, then thank you again, Dr. De La Torre. And I am assuming if we would like to have things responded to in 2 weeks, right? That, as you said, in the next 2 days, we'll send out the RFQ. All right, now we come to number 12. Communications from the audience regarding matters on the action agenda are to be made at this time. Dr. Choi?
Thank you, President Jack. We're pausing for 1 minute to take requests to speak on action items in the agenda. If you'd like to make a request, please press the raise hand icon or dial *9. 30 seconds remain. If you'd like to make a request to speak regarding action items on the agenda, please press the raise hand icon or dial *9. you, President Jack. We have no requests.
All right, thank you very much. Then we're going to move on. So action item revised instructional minutes. Principal Jason Kirkenbach.
There we go. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Thanks. Thanks for being here tonight for me. I really appreciate it. So we're trying to add 3 late start days to accommodate our CASP and our CAST schedule. And we're doing this throughout the month of March on successive Tuesdays, also as an opportunity to give the majority of our students 3 late start days, our 9th and 10th graders. Fortunately, our 11th graders will still have to take the test. So that's 2 days they will have to show up and do their best on the CASP. And our 12th graders will have to show up to do their best on the CAST, that's California Science Test. We didn't have these in the schedule before because, quite frankly, I have never given the test at the high school. Last year when we did it, we were on a very truncated schedule. We had plenty of minutes that we could move around because we were all at a distance. And the test itself was a much smaller test. The state basically cut it in half, and not even everyone in the state took it. So we're trying to give our kids the best option to do their best work, their best opportunity to take their time. So we'll provide 3 hours. And we're also then giving every day 2/3 of our staff and 2/3 of our students a chance to sort of rest, recharge, get a little brain break, a little mental health and emotional health break for a few days. So we're pretty confident that this is going to work out in our favor, both in terms of any results we get, but also in terms of giving our students and our staff a short little break at a very long time in the school year. March is going to be a very long month for us from our February dates for President's Day all the way to the spring break.
Thank you, Principal Kirkenbach. Thank you so much for that. Are there any questions from the board?
I just had one little edit on start time, late start 11:30 a.m. I think it used to say 12 p.m. On a previous one, which is why
that's probably what happened there, Jane. That's a good catch.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, we're not starting at 11:30. As much as the kids would love to start doing something at 11:30 p.m., let's not do that.
I don't think they'd want to keep going till 3 o'clock the next day either. That would be rough.
They could do it, the staff couldn't. I had a question. In the instructional minutes for the regular schedule, in a previous one, it said minutes was 370 minutes, but then here it says 376 minutes.
It was a passing period that was not included.
That's what I thought, because you can include like a passing period before or after a break or something, so it got added in. Okay, perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, well, if there are not any more questions, it is an action item. So will someone make a motion to approve the revised instructional minutes for the high school?
I move to approve the revised minutes.
Mrs. Chan, is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Who would like to second? I can't remember which one came first.
Either Shelley or I would. That's fine. Shelley can second.
All right, Mrs. Ryan. So roll call vote, Mr. Kalaki,
Aye.
Mr. Chang,
Aye.
Mrs. Chan,
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan,
Aye.
Nam Jack, aye. School board member?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Motion passes. Now we go to action item number 13B, reclassification criteria. Dr. Lena Richter.
Thank you, President Jack, members of the board, student board member, Superintendent Dr. Delatorre, and Cabinet. Tonight, we are excited to bring to you for approval SMU San Marino Unified School District's proposed English learner reclassification criteria. Reclassification is the process whereby a student is reclassified from an English learner status to a fluent English proficient status. Reclassification can take place at any time during the academic school year immediately upon the student meeting all criteria that has been set forth in California Ed Code and further detailed in Title V California Code of Regulations, which basically states that all school districts shall use the following 4 criteria for reclassifying English learners to fluent English proficient. Criteria 1 is the State Board of Education approves standardization of an overall performance level of 4, which is well developed on the English language proficiency assessment of California. That would be the LPAC assessment that our English learners take annually. That's criterion 1. The remaining 3 of the 4 criteria to follow continue to be locally determined at the LEA level. Criterion 2 is a comparison of student performance in basic skills against an empirically established range of performance in basic skills based on the performance of English proficient students of that same age. So basically comparing the performance levels of an empirically established range of performance, English learners with their non-English learner peers. Criterion 3 is the teacher evaluation criteria, which includes but is not limited to a review of students' curriculum mastery. And typically these are the students' marks or grades. Criterion 4 is parental opinion and consultation. And typically what this is where the parents are informed that their child has met reclassification criteria, parent agrees that they can be reclassified at this time, and the parent signs a reclassification form. So the form that you see up on the screen is the proposed San Marino Unified School District reclassification form. And this form reflects all 4 criteria that is outlined by the State Board of, by Ed Code and by the California Code of Regulations. Again, criterion 1, as you can see, is mandated by the state. We cannot change that. And that is a score of an overall 4 on the LPAC. Criterion 2, our proposed criteria, is to consider, depending on the grade level, CASP scores, iReady scores, and student marks or grades. Yeah, Stephen, if you can go up just a little bit more to the first page of that form, I think it's a little more clear there. Thank you. Criterion 3 is a teacher evaluation piece, and this is, again, student marks or student grades. And as you can see, we're using report card grades. And criterion 4 is the parent consultation and the parent consent form. Now, the second form that we're going to look at is the form that we're going to use with English learners with exceptional needs. Because oftentimes we would have students who also have an IEP who are unable to participate fully in the LPAC, which is the criterion number 1, without accommodations. So in these instances, the student's individualized educational program team, which is their IEP team members, will engage in dialogue and discussion on how the student's unique needs affect their ability to obtain an overall 4 or level 4, and whether reclassification should be considered on the basis of local alternative assessments and progress based on each student's specific needs and abilities. And this really is more dialogue and discussion with the entire IEP team if the student is unable to meet criterion number 1, being the LPAC. And the reclassification form for students with exceptional needs includes guiding questions for this dialogue and discussion during the IEP team meeting. Both SMUSD's proposed reclassification worksheets are directly aligned to the criteria that has been set forth by Ed Code. So we are completely in compliance. And pursuant to California Code of Regulations, specifically section 11308C6, which is the advisory committees, the reclassification criteria and process for reclassification was presented to the District English Language Advisory Committee, which is our DLAC committee, on December 4th, with an opportunity for members of the committee to make comment, provide input, and solicit advice. So we also met that compliance piece. I also want to say that the proposed criteria is really a culmination of the collaborative work between Ed Services and special education this Ed Services Department and the Special Education Department. I really would like to thank Danielle Blatchley, who is our Ed Services TOSA, and Rocky Comar, our Director of Special Education, for their work and their contributions in the development of this criteria. English learner reclassification criteria and processes are required to be locally approved. So as such, this evening, we are asking that the board approve the proposed reclassification criteria as presented.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Richter, for that wonderful presentation. Does the board have any questions for Dr. Richter? Mrs. Chan?
Hi, I guess I'm not really familiar with this. It's very extensive, it's very comprehensive and thorough. I appreciate you letting us know that it's in compliance and that everybody reviewed it. But can you just like pull back for a second for me and explain to me how this is different than what we used before, and how does this help support our students better?
Absolutely. It is only slightly different than when we have done before. Each time there is a revision to the reclassification criteria, we are required to have it locally approved. We have to bring it to the Board of Education and recommend approval. The one change that we did add, that's why we're bringing it back to the board for approval, is we added the iReady component. That is a comparison of basic skills that we are selecting to use for our elementary students, because that that assessment, we are able to give this year twice and next year 3 times. So it really will provide us a very current and relevant data set that we can use for reclassification purposes.
And right now we have, you mentioned Ms. Blatchley is overseeing this. And so moving forward, this would continue to fall under her position, her TOSA position?
For reclassification? Yes, she is currently administering the LPAC assessment, the summative LPAC assessment, and she is responsible for overseeing the reclassification of our English learners.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for Dr. Richter put this on the agenda. I have a question because usually for the English learner student, their parent may also have some English barrier. So once we approve this, we want to make sure, maybe I don't know who are in charge. Is that principal or site administrator or the director? So I think we need to fully explain to the parent, let them understand. For my experience, especially the new immigrant parent, sometimes they jump to me. They are asking when they will get out from as the English learner. So I think the communication is very important for the parent and the school.
Absolutely. We can't agree more with you. That's one reason why we do have both forms translated. So the parents will receive the translated form as well. And this information was presented to our English learner parents at the DLAC meeting. And for those that were not able to attend the DLAC meeting, the presentation was also sent to the parents. And it is revisited throughout the year during the DLAC meetings. And when we do have consultation with parents regarding the reclassification of their child, we do want to ensure that if interpretation is needed, we provide interpretation, because we also want to allow the parent the opportunity to ask questions. Well, what does it mean now that my child is reclassified? Will we continue to monitor his or her progress? And so Lou does a fantastic job. She's extremely valuable to us in helping us with interpretation with families who may need it.
Yeah, I just reviewed the translation. I think it's excellent. Yeah, thank you.
She's fantastic.
And the rule,
Okay, thank you very much. If there are no other questions, it's an action item. May I have a motion?
May I have a brief comment? Thank you, President Jack. Thank you. So Dr. Richter, this is excellent. Your work here is exceptional. I love the fact that it is translated, but I just wanted you to know that I notice how well you've done on this in terms of taking away the kind of the glass ceiling that may face the EL students. I love the progress monitoring with the iReady. And in terms of the monitoring 3 times a year, that's really good and it's exceptional. The fact that you guys are going down to level 3 and B, which is what the state proposes, and then when you're looking at now the full breadth of the LPAC, that's a real important consideration. So that's excellent that we were able to capture it. But how exceptional to have the partnership between the English language department with the special ed, because we have a lot of students or enough students that we need to be aware of in terms of how we can accommodate them and modify so they can be reclassified so that they are able to access four-year colleges and programs as they continue. So this is just an excellent job. I am so pleased to see it. And then also to note that I know that during the DLAC and ELAC meetings that you would be presenting this to the parents, and on the websites of these California Department of Education, I know that the parents would be sent to the videos, the resources, how to support their child. They can do the practice tests. And so I think that this is an excellent job, as you also have this kind of a survey of questions that the team gets together and makes determination in terms of level, listening, speaking, reading, writing, and then the various levels in terms of language acquisition. My one question is, I know this is a lot, but my one question is, in terms of the EL students, the English language learners, and the RFEPs, what are my numbers there on the dashboard?
For the number, if I'm understanding your question correctly, Board Member Ryan, the number of students who have been reclassified?
Yes, as opposed to the ones that are still English learners.
I don't have that number off the top of my head. It is in our LCAP, so it is data that we will be retrieving over the next couple of weeks, but I can definitely get that for you.
But it's on our dashboard, right? So I can go and look at it?
I don't believe it is on our dashboard. I would have to double check.
How about the once you check the number and let us know? I think this is the interest.
Yeah, and one thing that we do want to stress also is the law also states that once an English learner is reclassified, that's kind of not the end of their journey. We do want to make sure that they continue to be successful and that we did not exit them or they were not exited prematurely. So the law states that we do have to monitor their progress for the next 4 years, and we do have a system in place for that as well. But I will definitely bring back the number of English learners we have. I believe it's about 200, I want to say 260 district wide, but I will bring back the reclassification rate for you for this past year.
Thank you, because I was just very interested in not only the EL numbers, but then the reclassification, because the last 2 years during the pandemic, there were really low test takers on that LPAC. So a lot of kids didn't get reclassified. So that's why. Thank you so much, Dr. Richter. This is excellent.
All right, thank you so much. Would someone like to make a motion?
So moved.
Mrs. Ryan, a second. Oh, Mr. Chang. All right. Roll call vote. Mrs. Ryan?
Aye.
Mrs. Chan?
Aye.
Mr. Chang?
Aye.
Mr. Kalaki?
Aye.
Myself, I, school board member.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. That is the last item on our agenda, except for board superintendent discussion items. Are there any?
I have a question. So Dr. territory. So what is the progress right now for the remodel for the wellness center at the high school? Is that they already done or they still doing?
I believe most of that work has been completed. We were there a couple weeks ago and it looked like furniture hadn't been moved into some of those spaces, but I think they're almost completely done with that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And also, I'd like to wish everyone have a happy Lunar New Year in the year of a tiger.
Thank you. And
President Jack, I'm sorry, could I just ask one thing? Is there any way that I could please request the presentation be emailed for the item 11A and 11B? I don't think those were provided in the board packets, but it'd be great if I could see those PowerPoint presentations, if you could send them, that'd be appreciated.
thank you. All
Thank
right,
you.
if that's it, I'm going to call the meeting adjourned because there's no need to go to closed session. And as Mr. Chang says, Happy Lunar New Year. Thank you, everyone. Meeting adjourned.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yeah.